Welcome to the channel. Today we're sharing a cheating story you won't believe. If you enjoy it, please like and subscribe. Let's get started. Sophia sat on the bed, smiling up at Daniel as he stood in front of her. She slipped his shirt out of his pants, unbuttoned it, and tossed it aside. She started kissing his stomach and chest softly, making Daniel close his eyes and let out a quiet moan. Sophia leaned back and gave him a grin. Daniel gripped her shoulders for balance, holding on tight. After a moment, he collapsed onto the bed, breathing heavily. Sophia took that pause to undress herself and lay down beside him, still gripping his hair. She pulled Daniel closer, kissed him deeply, and with a firm gaze, said, "Enough playing around. I need you now." Daniel didn't need to be asked twice. He held himself, planted deep inside of her for a few seconds before collapsing exhausted onto the bed next to her. Both of them just lay there, gasping for air. They lay there resting for a few minutes before they got up, took a shower in our guest bathroom, and got dressed to go back to work. Before they left the room, Sophia pulled Daniel in for one last kiss. "Listen, that was amazing, but we can't do this again," Sophia said. "You said that last week too. But you know you can't get enough of this," Daniel replied. "I know, but Michael is acting funny, and I think he may be getting suspicious. And that whole deal with your wife trying to call you last week has got me a little nervous. While this may be amazing, I'm not willing to ruin my marriage for a little sex, no matter how good it is." "Okay, I hear you," Daniel replied. "You're right. We need to take a break for a while until things settle down. I don't want to lose Rebecca either." At that point, I had seen enough. I picked up my laptop and slammed it against the nearest wall. This cheating 304 was going to pay, and if I ever got my hands on this old Daniel, he was going to die a slow, painful death. But before I kill him, my office door opened just slightly, and my assistant, Emily, hesitantly stuck her head in and asked, "Are you okay, Mr. Nelson?" Taking a deep breath, I replied, "Yes, Emily, I'm fine. I'm sorry if I frightened you. I think I'm going to leave for the day and head to the gym. I have some things that I need to work through, and I think a hard workout may help me. Oh, and Emily, could you call IT and see about getting me a new laptop?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Nelson. They'll get on that right now." With that, I grabbed my coat and headed out the door. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Michael Nelson, and that was my wife of almost 14 years in that video. We met in college, and after dating for a year, we married just after graduation. As far as I knew, we had a great marriage for all of those years and 2 great kids. I guess I was wrong. This all started a few days ago when Rebecca Reed, Jason's wife, came to see me, concerned that there was something going on between her husband and my wife. If not for her, I would still be oblivious to the going on right under my nose in my own house. 3 days earlier, Emily said, "Mr. Nelson, I have a Mrs. Reed in the lobby to see you. She said that her husband, Daniel, works with your wife and that it was urgent that she see you." "Thank you, Emily. Did she say what this was about?" "No, sir. She just said that it was personal. Tell her I'll be there in a few minutes." I had a bad feeling about this. Why would a woman that I had only met once at a company New Year's party be coming to see me about a personal issue? It was only 9:30 a.m., and I had done nothing all day but put out fires, and now this. What's worse is that it's only Wednesday. Maybe it was time to scrap my rule of no drinking until after 6 p.m. I walked into the lobby and saw a pretty brunette sitting on the sofa. "Mrs. Reed, I'm Michael Nelson. Please come back to my office and we can talk." "Thank you, but please call me Rebecca," she said as she stood to shake my hand. "Okay. Well, follow me, Rebecca, and please call me Michael," I replied as I led her around the corner into my office and shut the door. "Please have a seat and tell me what's on your mind," I said as I motioned to the sofa in the corner of the office. As she crossed the room, I couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was. Rebecca Reed had shoulder-length black hair, and while some would say she was 10 to 15 pounds overweight, to me it looked like she had curves in all the right places. I took a seat in one of the chairs facing the sofa and noticed that her hands were shaking as she tried to collect her thoughts. "Michael, I don't really know how to say this, so I'm just going to be blunt. I believe that my husband is having an affair with your wife, and I was hoping you could help me prove it. I don't know if you have suspected anything, but I can show you what I know, and we can start from there if that's okay with you." Wow. Not only was she beautiful, but she was certifiably crazy. I didn't know her husband very well, but I did know my Sophia, and the last thing she would ever do is cheat on me and our kids. But I could tell that the only way I was going to get out of this situation was to listen to what she had to say and try to convince her that she was being paranoid. Well, Rebecca, please excuse my skepticism, but that is really hard to believe. But show me what you have and let's see where it leads us, I told her. She took a couple of deep breaths to calm herself and collect her thoughts. And then she began. Okay, last Saturday, I was in town running some errands and decided to surprise Daniel at the office and see if he wanted to grab some lunch. But when I got to his office, he wasn't there. I asked around and was told that he left for lunch at around 9:30 a.m. I thought that was strange since I packed him a lunch that morning, like I do every day. So thinking that maybe he was running some errands, I tried to call him to see if he wanted to meet me somewhere, but he didn't answer. I could see the tears forming in the corner of her eyes when she paused for a minute. At this point, I'm thinking I really need to get her through this story and out of here before the waterworks start. I handed her a box of tissues from the table and asked, "So where does Sophia come into this?" She wiped her eyes and nose before she continued. When he still hadn't returned my call by the time I got home, I was starting to get a little worried because that just wasn't like him. Then it hit me about 6 months ago when our oldest son started driving. I downloaded one of those apps that tracks your location by your cell phone on all of our phones. I knew that it also tracked mine and Jason's phones, so I pulled up the app and found his location. It was an address about 15 minutes from his office in a neighborhood that I didn't recognize. When I searched for that address online, your name came up, and I remembered you and your wife from the New Year's party. I still wasn't convinced that Sophia and Daniel were having an affair, but this was certainly suspicious. I would have to ask Sophia about this later. So, Rebecca, I asked, did you ask him why he was at my house in the middle of the day? No, but let me finish. This app also tracks everywhere you've been for the past 60 days. So I pulled up Jason's history and found that he has been going to your house every Thursday for the past 3 weeks. He would leave his office at 9:30 a.m. and arrive at your house around 11:15 a.m. He would stay there until around 2 p.m. and then drive back to his office. That's when I knew what was going on. When I asked him that evening why he hadn't called me back, he told me that he was with a client. I can't think of but one reason why he would lie to me. I could feel the rage boiling up in me as she spoke, but thankfully I caught myself before I exploded on her. Rebecca was just the messenger, and she was obviously hurting enough. It was my turn to take a few deep breaths and compose myself. Then it hit me. The history on my security system could confirm if she was correct. So I pulled up the system on my phone app and scrolled back 3 weeks, and there it was. Sophia had disarmed the system at 11:15 a.m. and rearmed it at 2 p.m. I then scrolled through to find corresponding entries at the same times for the next 2 Thursdays, but nothing suspicious prior to 3 weeks ago. Rebecca just sat there quietly, crying while I paced the floor, trying to figure out what to do. Then it hit me. I picked up the phone and called my friend, Jonathan Brooks. "Hey Daniel, I know it's spur of the moment, but could you come over to my office as soon as possible? I have an urgent matter that I need your help with." Daniel confirmed that he would be here in about 10 minutes. I explained to Rebecca that Daniel was my security system contractor. I develop residential and commercial property, and Daniel installs the security in all of my projects, including my house. My plan was to get photographic proof of whatever was going on before we confronted either spouse. Daniel arrived as promised, and after I told him of the situation, he laid out for me exactly what we needed to do if we were sure we really wanted to see what was going on. "Just be sure this is what you want, Michael. Once you see the pictures, you'll never be able to fully get the images out of your head." I looked at Rebecca, and she nodded in agreement. So I told Daniel, let's do this and let the pieces fall where they may. Daniel explained that my current security system would not be of much help. The cameras inside the house are motion activated, but they only activate when the system is armed. This is designed to ensure privacy. But he could install some really small high-def cameras in whichever rooms I chose that would give us crystal clear video and audio of everything going on in those rooms. I gave him the go-ahead, and he promised to get everything installed the next day after Sophia left for work. The plan was to install 3 cameras each in the master bedroom, the guest bedroom, and the great room. Daniel promised that he could set them up so that we could get a 360-degree view of everything in those rooms. The cameras would be motion-activated and capable of automatically filtering the light to get perfect pictures at any time, day or night. The cameras transmitted a signal to a receiver that Daniel installed in my attic, and I could watch them via a phone app. The video would also be saved in the cloud in case I needed it in the future. Now all we had to do was keep our cool for a couple of days and see what we found out. That was a lot harder to do than I imagined, but I kept myself busy with work and even worked from my home office in the evenings after dinner to avoid any lengthy conversations with Sophia. Rebecca had it a little easier. Her kids were both still at home, so she stayed busy with their activities. With 2 young daughters, she was running around with them, and as was normal, she barely had a moment alone with Daniel in the evenings. At my house, it was only me and Sophia, so it was a little harder. All of our kids are off at college. Our daughter Lily is a senior, and our twin boys, Ethan and Nathan, are sophomores. They all attend the same college where Sophia and I met. I spent most of Tuesday and Wednesday evenings alone in my office, trying to figure out how to tell them about all of this. Finally, Thursday arrived. That morning, Sophia kissed me goodbye when I left, just like she did every other day. From her actions, this was just like every other day for the past 14 years. Since Monday, I had been trying to remember any strange changes in her behavior over the past 3 weeks, and there really wasn't much there. The only thing that stood out was that it seemed she had been a lot more aggressive in bed on the weekends. She was normally a follower and let me lead the way, but she had started taking charge more in the bedroom. I remember really liking it until I found out the reason for the change. So that brings us to today. In the video from earlier, after the 2 lovebirds left my house, I downloaded the video to my laptop, emailed a copy to Rebecca Reed, and sat down to watch it in my office. Now I just had to figure out what to do next, preferably something that doesn't land me in jail. On my way to the gym, I called Richard Thompson, my attorney, and explained everything to him. He said he would draw up divorce papers, filing on the basis of adultery. Normally in our state, it takes around 10 months to complete a divorce, but there is a loophole for adultery that allows you to finalize in just 5 months. I had no plans to draw this out. I also made one more call to my good friend, Christopher Adams, who just happens to be the area vice president at the bank where both Sophia and Daniel Reed work. I have used Charles to finance almost all of my projects over the past 14 years, and he owes me a lot of favors. I intended to collect on a few of those favors now. I explained what was going on and told him I would send him the evidence and expressed my confidence that he would handle things appropriately for 2 employees engaged in a sexually inappropriate relationship during work hours. He assured me that he would take care of everything and that I would be totally satisfied with his actions. 2 hours later, after a long hard workout and a shower, I couldn't put this off any longer. I had to face Sophia at some point. On the way home, I played a musical playlist from my phone and tried to use some of the techniques I had learned years earlier in college while preparing for big football games. These techniques had always helped me clear my mind and focus with laser-like precision on the task at hand. I pulled into the garage and parked in my usual spot before heading into the house where I found Sophia in the kitchen working on dinner, just like every night. "Hi, honey. How was your day?" she asked while smiling at me over her shoulder. "Shitty," I grunted as I dropped my briefcase and headed to the bar for a drink. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked. "As a matter of fact, you can," I replied. "Take a break and come into the den with me for a second. I have something I need you to look at." She came in and slid in beside me on the sofa, rubbing my thigh with her hand. "Okay, baby, so what exactly is it that you want to show me?" I took out my phone, pulled up the video app, turned the volume up to the maximum, and hitting play, handed her my phone. She watched the black screen for a second, and then a look of horror enveloped her face as she saw herself and Daniel. "Oh," she mumbled. Then panic set in as the scene unfolded on my phone. "No, baby. Oh no," she cried out, dropping my phone on the floor. "Baby, I can explain, it's not what you think," she pleaded. That was it. At that moment, all of my patience and self-control was suddenly gone and replaced with all of the hurt I had experienced over the past week. And I just exploded. "What the hell is it that you want to explain? You don't have to explain a damn thing to me." The video was pretty clear. It was blatantly obvious that I am married to a lying, cheating 304 who obviously cares more about herself and some pencil dick to holy than she does about the man who has loved her for 17 years or her children. "Is there anything else that you would like to explain?" When I calmed myself down, I noticed that she was sobbing into her hands. "Please, Michael, I know I screwed up bad, but please don't call me those horrible names. I am so sorry. Can I make it up to you somehow?" That did it. Call you names? I'm not calling you names, I'm just stating the facts. Lying? Yep, that's what you've been doing since you started your affair with a holy. Cheating? Yep, I think that video proves that. 304? Once again, refer to the video. So dear, please explain how I'm calling you names. As far as being sorry, the only thing you're sorry about is getting caught. You sure as hell didn't look sorry while you were screwing a holy. My face was flushed, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. I closed my eyes and took some deep breaths to calm myself before I had a heart attack. When I opened my eyes, Sophia was curled up in a fetal position, sobbing. Okay, Michael, I whispered to myself, get it together. Just explain the options to her and get the hell out of here. Listen, Sophia, I just want you to be clear on your options at this point. George is drawing up divorce papers as we speak. You will be served with those next week, and you need to take those to a lawyer and have him review them. I think I am being very fair in what I am offering. Half the equity in the house, half the retirement accounts, and $3,000 per month for 10 months. You've got 2 weeks to sign them to avoid going to court, where I will be forced to play that video for the whole world to see, including your children and your parents. It's your choice. Now I'm going to leave, so please do not call me, do not text me, do not email me. In fact, if you see me around town, please turn in the opposite direction because I don't even want to see your face. Is that clear? With that, I got up, went upstairs, packed some clothes, and headed to my car. I'll send someone to get the rest of my things. You can stay here until the divorce is final. I can't stand the thought of being in this house after the way you've defiled it. I paused and looked back for a moment at my home of 12 years, and then slammed the door, leaving her sobbing on the sofa. When I left my house, I drove straight to the suite that my secretary, Emily, had arranged over the past few years. Every time my company developed in suite complex, I began including 4 to 5 furnished suites in each development to rent as short-term executive suites. Our area has a lot of foreign companies, and many of them have managers from their home office come to town for several months at a time. These units have been very popular with these companies and normally rent for about 4 times the normal lease rate of the other units in the complex. Who would have ever thought at the time that I would end up living in one of these units? I opened the door, dropped my bags in the entryway, and collapsed into one of the chairs in the living area, suddenly feeling really exhausted. Just then, my phone buzzed. Who the hell keeps calling? I pulled the phone out of my pocket and saw 12 missed calls. 8 from Sophia, 2 from my daughter, Lily, and 1 each from my sons. What part of "don't call me" does this witch not understand? I quickly deleted all of Angela's calls before hitting the button to call my daughter back. Daddy, are you okay? She answered. Baby, I'm fine. What's going on? I replied. Well, Mom called about an hour ago looking for you. She sounded really upset, and when I asked her what was wrong, she said you guys had some kind of fight and that you stormed out of the house and won't answer her calls. She said that she's tried to call you but that you won't answer your phone. That doesn't sound like you, so I got scared that something might have happened to you, Lily said. Well, that didn't take long. That's probably why the boys are calling as well, I thought. Lily, I can assure you that nothing has happened to me. What your mother failed to tell you was that we were fighting because she decided that I wasn't good enough for her. So she found herself another man and started sneaking him into the house at lunch to have sex with him. So it wasn't exactly a fight, it was more like him divorcing her. And I never want to see her again. Now she thinks that she can explain it all away if he'll just listen to her. But it'll be a cold day in hell before I listen to any more of her lies. I suddenly realized that I was yelling at my daughter, so I paused to catch my breath. It was then that I heard her crying on the other end. Well, I obviously didn't handle that very well, did I? I told myself. I was able to get my emotions in check and go on to explain everything to Lily. I made sure to let her know that I didn't want this to come between her and her mother. This was between Sophia and me. I wanted her to understand that this didn't affect her relationship with either of us. After I hung up with Lily, I called Ethan and Nathan and let each of them know what was going on as well. Unfortunately for Sophia, they both inherited my temper, and they were both really pissed at their mother when we hung up. They'll eventually make peace with her, but she will get a lot of rage from them before everything settles down. The next few weeks passed by fairly quietly. I buried myself in my work and the gym and tried to stay too busy to think about the storm my life had become. My only social contacts outside of work were my kids and Rebecca Reed. I talked to the kids several times each week. The boys kept the conversations to school and sports. Lily would catch me up on what was happening with her, but she would also try to bring up Sophia, who, according to my daughter, was not doing well at all. Rebecca Reed and I met for lunch every Monday. It was probably not the best move given our circumstances, but we both needed someone to talk to, and no one else really understood what we were going through. I was moving full speed ahead to divorce Sophia, but Rebecca was having some second thoughts. It was different for her. She still had children at home, and a divorce would be much messier for her and Daniel. She would often use me for a sounding board about the decision she was facing. On the last day before her deadline, George informed me that Sophia had finally signed the papers and returned them to his office. Now it was just a matter of waiting the 5 months for a court date to finalize the agreement. The only request Sophia had made was that I let her talk to me before we go to court. Despite my objections, George made it clear that things would go much smoother in court if I met with her. He said that most judges would not look favorably on a spouse who was ending a 15-year marriage without any kind of counseling or at least some honest discussions between the two parties. I finally agreed to meet with her, but it would be when I was ready. Over the next month, I reverted back to the way I was before I met Sophia. I worked hard, I worked out like a madman, and I played hard. My business required me to be out of town for a couple of nights each week, and most of those nights included dinner and drinks, usually at a bar after work. I am a creature of habit, so this was a pattern that I had followed for years, but normally I would eat, have a couple of drinks, have some conversations with whoever was sitting near me at the bar, and then head to my room to call Sophia and the kids. There would sometimes be some harmless flirting with some of the women patrons, but it never went beyond that. I'm not proud to admit it, but since Sophia blew up our marriage by cheating on me, I was drinking more than I should when I was on the road. The harmless flirting got out of hand and wasn't so harmless anymore. I ended up hooking up with a few of the women I met while traveling. Some were single and some were married, but I didn't really care. Their marriages were not my problem. I was furious with Sophia for what she did, and I hated Daniel for involving himself in my marriage, but now I had allowed myself to do the same thing to other men's marriages. I was searching for anything to make the hurting go away, but nothing seemed to work. During this time, Rebecca Reed and I continued to meet for lunch each week. We had even gone out on a few dates in the evenings. We didn't call them dates, but we were both lonely, and sometimes you just need to spend time with a friendly face. It was certainly more satisfying to me than the one-night stands. There was no sexual relationship, but I had kissed her goodnight a few times, lingering a little longer than I probably should have on more than one occasion. Rebecca and I were out for dinner one Monday night, and I noticed that she was quieter than usual and that she was just playing with her food. There was obviously something on her mind. She finally stopped and looked me in the eye. Michael, as you know, we've been out a few times lately, and whether we call it what it is or not, they have basically been dates. And I know it's been a little awkward the last few times when we said goodbye. It was like we both wanted more than just a kiss, but we were afraid to let things go any farther. So I wanted you to know that I think I really need for things to, how do I put this, move a little farther along, at least physically. So I'm just going to come out and ask you something. You'll understand if you say no, but if I don't ask you now, I'll lose my nerve. The way she was acting had me more than a little nervous, but finally, I just said, go ahead. You know you can ask me anything. Okay, here goes. As you know, Daniel and I were high school sweethearts, and before all of this, we had only been with each other when it came to sex. At that point, she paused to collect her thoughts. I'm not really sure whether I can give him a second chance or not. Some days I want to try, and some days I just want a fresh start on my own. But I'm still a woman, and I still have certain needs, if you know what I mean. And I think you probably have some of those same needs. I just nodded to let her know that I understood as she paused to collect her thoughts. So what I wanted to ask you was if you would be willing to help me take care of those needs. I know that sounds crazy, but there's no way I could ever just pick up a stranger and go to bed with him. But you're my friend, and I trust you. Don't worry about hurting my feelings if you say no. I will understand, but I really think this is something that I need, and maybe it would be good for you too. For once in my life, I was speechless. That was the last question that I ever expected to be asked. I carefully thought about how to respond before speaking. Rebecca, wow, I'm certainly flattered that you would feel comfortable enough to ask me to help you with this. Please don't take my hesitation to mean that I'm not interested. I think you are absolutely beautiful, and I've been attracted to you since you first walked into my office. My first instinct is to scream yes at the top of my lungs, but I really just need some time to think through all of the ramifications before I give you a final answer. How about if I call you in the morning with my answer? Sure, I understand. I know this is a huge favor I'm asking, and I can certainly understand if you decide not to do it. I just didn't know who else I could come to. After that, we finished eating and talked a little more before it was time to go. I promised to call her first thing in the morning with my answer. At some level of my soul, I knew I was going to do it as soon as she asked. Hell, I had been imagining what it would be like to be with her for weeks now. I just needed to convince myself that I could do this and then walk away from her. I knew that if after this, she decided to commit to her marriage, that I couldn't see her anymore, not even for lunch. It came to me on my way home that evening that just maybe this could help us both move on. So I called her. "Hello," she answered. "Hey Rebecca, this is Michael. I've thought about what you asked and my answer is yes on one condition." There was silence for a second on the other end before she tentatively asked, "So what is this condition?" "Well, if we just met at my suite or at your house and had sex, it would just feel like a one-night stand. I need something more from you to feel comfortable doing this. So the condition is this. I think a change of scenery would do us both some good. If you will agree to go away with me this weekend, I will agree to have sex with you at some point over that time. We could leave on Friday and come back late Monday." "Wow, count me in," she replied. "I was so sure you were going to say no. They'll just tell Daniel that I need to get away to clear my head and that he needs to watch the boys for a few days. What time do you want to leave? They'll text you with the plans tomorrow, and Rebecca, I'm really looking forward to this. Bye." As soon as Emily got in to work the next day, I had her make all the reservations for the weekend, and then I texted Rebecca and told her to meet me at the airport at noon on Friday. In spite of all of her questions, I insisted that everything was a surprise, and she would just have to wait until Friday to find out the details. So after an agonizingly slow week, here I was standing in front of the terminal when I saw her walking towards me wearing a pair of tight, faded jeans, boots, and a form-fitting sweater that accentuated her full breasts. "You look amazing. By the time we board our flight, you'll be the envy of every man in this airport," I said. She leaned in to give me a hug and whispered in my ear, "If you keep talking like that, you won't make it to that plane, mister. So what's the big surprise?" "Where exactly are you taking me, Mr. Nelson?" I just smiled as I handed her the ticket. "San Francisco. You've got to be kidding me. I've always wanted to go there." "Well, Mrs. Reed, you'll be pleased to know that we have reservations at some very fine restaurants for the next 3 nights and tickets to see Wicked on Broadway tomorrow night." I grabbed her bag and headed to check in with a very happy lady at my side. After a smooth flight, we landed at San Francisco Airport and took a cab to our hotel. It was one of my favorites. It was located across from Golden Gate Park, and our room looked out over the park. It was just after 6 p.m. when we checked into the hotel. We quickly unpacked and put away our bags before freshening up for dinner. Our reservations were for 7:45 p.m., and the restaurant was only a 10-minute walk from the hotel, so we had plenty of time. Rebecca was standing by the window, staring out at the city while I tied my tie. When I walked up beside her, she turned and wrapped her arms around me. "Well, Mr. Nelson, I asked for one small favor, and you take it to a completely different level than anything I could ever imagine. This is absolutely amazing. I could be mistaken, but I'm thinking that all of this may have just entitled you to the girlfriend experience this weekend." "That's what I was hoping for, Mrs. Reed," I replied as I pulled her closer and gently kissed her. After a few seconds, I pulled away. "We better stop this now and head to dinner, or we're never going to make it because I am getting really close to just throwing you on that bed and having you for dinner." We made the 10-minute walk to the restaurant hand in hand while taking in the sights and sounds of the city. The dinner was amazing, just like I remembered it from the last time I was here, and after dessert and way too much wine, we headed back to the hotel. When we got back to the room, I could tell that she was getting nervous, so I took both of her hands in mine and looked directly into her eyes. "I want you to know that we won't do anything that you are not comfortable with. If all you want to do is act like tourists and enjoy the city, that's fine with me. If you want to go through with your original request, that's fine too. I just want you to relax and enjoy the weekend. No pressure, okay?" I led her over to the window, moving behind her and wrapping my arms around her waist. "I want you to look out at this beautiful city. This weekend is all about you. I want you to experience things you never have before. Just try to relax and let me take care of everything. I want you to experience the food, the sights, the attractions, and the arts. Let's just enjoy the city. And if you want to explore some casual sex between friends, I will be more than happy to make that happen." I could see the tears forming in the corner of her eyes. "No, Michael, I really want to go through with this, and I need it more than you will ever know. I'm just really nervous. I've only been with one man, and after all that's happened, I just feel so inadequate because I obviously wasn't able to keep him satisfied." "Listen, Rebecca, I think we are both in the same place. We both feel inadequate in a number of ways, but what they did is not about us. No matter what was lacking in our marriages, they didn't have the right to go outside of the marriages looking for answers. They should have addressed those with us. If anyone is inadequate, it's the two of them. Now enough about them. Let's just enjoy being here and being with each other for the next few days. With that, I gently kissed the back of her neck, just behind her right ear. Rebecca closed her eyes and leaned back into me, tilting her head, inviting me to continue. Now let's hear the story from Samantha's perspective. Yes, that feels so good. I closed my eyes and leaned into his body. With his left hand, he pulled my hair to the side of my neck and continued planting gentle kisses just above the top of my dress. I could feel his hands moving down my sides, brushing against the sides of my breasts before finally coming to rest on my hips. His lips continued to brush against my skin, and then he took my earlobe into his mouth and gently sucked. Looking him in the eyes, I pulled his head closer and pressed my lips against his, tentatively pressing my tongue between his lips to explore his mouth. My other hand rested on the small of his back, pulling him against me as hard as I could. Finally, I pulled free, telling him, "Why don't you get rid of these pesky clothes while I go to the bathroom?" I closed the door and looked at myself in the mirror. Am I really going to go through with this? I closed my eyes for a second, took another look, and made up my mind. Hell yes. In no way was I prepared for what I found when I came out of the bathroom. Michael was hanging his clothes in the closet when I opened the door, but at the sound of the door, he turned to face me. Holy shit, I thought. Standing before me was a truly fine specimen of a man, obviously not shy at all. He walked towards me, pulled me to him, and kissed me hard. When he broke the kiss, he held my shoulders and looked into my eyes. I think someone is overdressed. Why don't we get you out of these? I turned my back to him, and he didn't hesitate to unzip my dress and let it fall to the floor. Michael stepped back and sat on the bed, staring at me standing in front of him in just my bra and panties. I was a little self-conscious about the extra pounds I carried, but Michael never seemed to notice. Damn, Rebecca, you were so beautiful. Bring that sexy body over here. When I got close to the bed, Michael pulled me to him, wrapping his arms around me. I rolled into him and buried my face in his neck, kissing his neck and shoulders. I then crawled onto my knees and worked my way down his chest, planting gentle kisses along the way. I paused for a moment on my way down his body to tease him with gentle licks and bites before continuing to kiss down his washboard abs. I couldn't take the teasing any longer. Thank God he was being gentle. When he finished, he rolled to my side, and we just lay there on our backs, trying to catch our breath. Exhausted, I rolled to my side, and the last thing I remember before going to sleep was the feeling of Aaron's arm draped over me as he spooned me. Apparently, I must have slept very soundly because when I woke in the morning, I was in that same position with Michael kissing my neck. I could feel his hand caressing my leg. Eventually, I got up to take a shower, leaving him in the bed. I had almost finished when the shower door opened, and Michael stepped into the shower with me. I could tell by the smile on his face that he was not here to get clean. Damn, don't you ever get enough? I asked. Not when I'm with someone as beautiful as you, he replied. In no time, he had me bent over the bench in the shower, screwing me. This time, it didn't take long for both of us. After we finished, we washed each other really well and got dressed for breakfast. We had an absolutely wonderful day touring the city before going to another fabulous dinner and then to the theater to watch Wicked, which was wonderful. By the time we returned to the room, it was after midnight, but we were both still hyped from the show. We undressed each other and fell into bed where we screwed each other 3 more times before we fell asleep, satisfied and exhausted. I woke up and had finished my shower, and Michael had just gotten in when the room phone rang. Who would be calling us here? I thought. I took a second, trying to decide whether I should answer before I finally picked up the phone. Hello. Hello, I must have the wrong room. I was looking for Michael Nelson. The female voice on the line asked. No, hold on. This is Aaron's room. He's in the shower now, but he'll be glad to give him a message, Rebecca answered. Well, could you just go get him? This is his daughter, and there's a family emergency, and I need to talk with him now. It's really important. Sure, let me go get him. I headed to the bathroom to get Michael, thinking to myself, it looks like we're busted. Michael, your daughter's on the phone and said there's been some kind of family emergency. She needs to talk to you right now. I noticed the worry on his face when he heard that his daughter had found us. I'm guessing that she had no idea that we were here together. They'll be right there. Now let's hear it from Aaron's perspective. I wrapped a towel around my waist, suddenly feeling self-conscious about being naked in a hotel room with a woman other than Sophia. I walked out to the bed and sat on the edge. I picked up the phone, looked at Rebecca, and took a deep breath before answering. Hello, Lily. Hello, Daddy. Yes, dear, I answered. What's wrong? Daddy, it's Ethan. He was in a car accident. Oh, how is he? I asked. He's going to be fine, but he's in bad shape right now. He has a concussion and some broken ribs, but the biggest thing is he broke his leg, and he's got to have surgery tomorrow. Listen, baby, I'm going to work on getting a flight out of here today, and he'll be there as soon as I can. Text me which medical center he's in and his room number, and he'll let you know my flight details as soon as I know them. Sure, Daddy. Oh, and Lily, how are the rest of you holding up? We're hanging in there. We just really need you here. Well, I'm on my way. Please be careful and let me know as soon as you find out about flights. Oh, and Lily, who was that woman that answered the phone? Oh, I thought. Well, that's a complicated story and probably best told in person. They'll fill you in when I see you. Bye. I quickly explained everything to Rebecca and told her I needed to find a flight and get home today. I tried to get her to stay and enjoy the city for another day since the room was already paid for, but she insisted on flying back with me. I was able to get 2 seats on a direct flight that would get us home by 3:45 p.m. So we quickly finished getting dressed and packed and headed to the airport. Once the plane had taken off, Rebecca put her hand on my knee and laid her head on my shoulder. I'm so sorry about Ethan. I'm sure he's going to be okay. Yeah, he's a tough kid. Listen, I'm sorry about our weekend. I really had a great time. I just hope you got what you needed out of it. Don't you worry about me at all, Rebecca said. I simply asked you to scratch a little itch for me, and I promise you it is well scratched, she kidded. I probably should have warned Rebecca that my doctor friend gave me a Cialis sample before we left on Friday. I don't need Cialis to perform, but I really wanted to make a good impression. It definitely did its job. The only problem was on Friday night when my erection wouldn't go away, and all I could think of were those commercials where they tell you, for an erection lasting longer than 4 hours, seek immediate medical attention. I was getting worried for a while. We then settled in for the 90-minute flight home. We both slept almost the entire time. Apparently, I'm not quite the man I used to be because I was exhausted. I didn't wake up until I felt the wheels hit the ground. Rebecca and I quickly gathered our bags and said our goodbyes. I promised to keep her posted on Ethan, and we agreed to talk later in the week. We both needed a little time to process everything that happened in San Francisco and where we go from here. I found my car and headed to the medical center to check on Ethan. This was going to be really hard. I was about to see Sophia for the first time in months, and I really didn't know what to say or how to act. I was also going to have to face Lily and explain why her father was in San Francisco in a hotel room with a woman she didn't know about. Then, suddenly, in a moment of clarity, it came to me what I needed to do. I needed to put all of this behind me for the moment and focus my attention on my son, who needed my immediate attention. Then I needed to deal with Sophia and all of the unresolved issues and feelings. When I caught her with Daniel, I vented my anger by yelling and cutting off all contact with her. Then I tried to boost my self-esteem by having one-night stands while I was traveling. Now I had tried to move on and start a relationship with Rebecca, but I had yet to find any peace. Finally, it was clear that until I worked through all of this with Sophia and brought closure to our relationship, I could never move on. I got off the elevator and followed the signs to George Hugh's room. Before I opened the door, I took a second to work up my nerve. I was actually nervous about going in. How had it come to the point where I was uncomfortable seeing my family? Okay, Michael, get yourself together and just go in and be yourself. So I took one last breath and opened the door. Daddy, Lily exclaimed. I'm so glad you finally made it. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me, squeezing me tight. Well, hello to you too, baby girl. I then saw my other son, Nathan, sitting in one of the chairs. I looked over at him and smiled. What, no hug for the old man? Hey, Dad, he said. When I got to his chair, he stood up and hugged me too. It looks like George Hugh's going to be laid up for a while, so I guess now when you come up to school, you can just take your favorite son out to play a round of golf. Huh? Yeah, I laughed. I guess I won't have to take Ethan along just to keep him from getting jealous. But when he gets back to normal, we'll have to play it cool and ask him to come along too. I turned to George Hugh's bed, and he appeared to be asleep at the moment. Sophia was sitting by his side like I knew she would be. It was obvious that I was making her nervous. She had yet to raise her head to look at me. If we were going to make it through the next few days, I knew it was going to be up to me to ease the tension. I walked over beside the bed next to her. So, Sophia, how's our boy? Well, not too bad at the moment, but he gave us quite the scare yesterday, she answered. For the next couple of hours, we sat around George Hugh's room and reminisced about the kids growing up and some of the crazy things they did. After the initial tension, everyone seemed to relax. At around 7:45 p.m., I insisted that everyone go home. I told Lily and Nathan to go back to school and that either their mom or I would call them as soon as Ethan was out of surgery. I also made Sophia go home. She looked exhausted, and I really wasn't ready to be alone with her yet. The next day, George Hugh's surgery went well, and a few days later, he was released to go home. Sophia and I managed to get him home and settled into his room. Being back in the house brought back some unpleasant memories, but I had promised myself that I would just suck it up for George Hugh's sake. After he was settled, I told him goodbye and that I would stop by to see him tomorrow. I was almost out of the house when Sophia stopped me to remind me that I had promised to talk with her about what had happened before our divorce was finalized and that we only had a few weeks left before the court date. Damn, I knew she was right. Okay, I guess I've put this off as long as I can, I thought. How about I come by on Saturday morning, and I'll let you tell me everything you have to say. Yeah, Saturday would work for me. How about around 7:15 a.m., and I'll fix some breakfast? She asked. Sounds good, Sophia. I'll see you then. I spent the next 2 days catching up at work and figuring out what I wanted to say on Saturday. Rebecca and I met for dinner on Friday night and talked about the prior weekend. I just wanted to make sure she was all right with everything that happened. And she was. We both agreed that neither of us was ready for another serious relationship right now, but we both also agreed that an occasional date and roll in the hay was still on the table. And just to prove it to ourselves, we went back to my suite and had sex like a couple of horny college kids for a couple of hours before she had to head home to her boys. True to my word, I showed up at my old house at 7:15 a.m. Sophia met me at the door and had a big breakfast ready. After I checked on Ethan and the three of us ate breakfast, Ethan headed to his room to catch up on the classwork that he had missed the past week, and Sophia and I went out on the patio for some privacy. She sat there nervously for a few seconds, obviously trying to make sure she said things just right. First of all, I need to tell you that I am sorry. I'm sorry for what I did with Daniel. I'm sorry for hurting you. I'm sorry for all the lies. You need to know that I realize that this is all my fault. You did absolutely nothing to deserve what I did. I just want to try to explain why I did what I did, but please don't take any of these to be excuses because there is no excuse for what I've done. At this point, she paused to see my reaction. I just sat quietly and waited for her to continue. This was her show, and at this point I still wasn't in any mood to go easy on her. Her apology did mean something to me on a certain level, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to accept it yet. I had forgiven her weeks earlier, but that was for my sanity. I was so wrapped up in my anger that it was making me ill at times. Then Rebecca convinced me that I needed to forgive Sophia. She helped me process the idea that by forgiving her, I wasn't saying that what she did was okay. I was just telling myself that it was time to move on with life. When she realized that I was not going to respond, she decided to continue. Also, just so you know, I have been seeing a counselor for the past couple of months to try to figure out why I did what I did. So a lot of this comes from my discussions with her. At this point, I'm thinking, great, now comes the part where all of this is my fault or her parents' fault or the kids' fault. So I sat there for the next hour and let her say everything she wanted to say, just as I promised I would. It was all a load of crap, of course, but I let her say it all. I'm sure it made sense to her. Apparently, this all started when the boys left to go to college. She felt lonely and depressed. She had spent the past 18 years focusing most of her attention on the children, and now they were all gone and didn't need her anymore. She had always suffered from mild depression, and the kids all leaving home just made the depression worse. I was wrapped up in my work and didn't spend much time with her. Her counselor told her that when children leave home, the parents must shift their focus from the children and find their fulfillment from other people or things, preferably from their spouse. According to her, I had my work, which was what I had always turned to for fulfillment, but she had nothing. Her job was just a job to her, a way to keep herself busy. So she was bored and lonely, and Daniel just happened to be there and started inviting her to lunch. She acknowledged that it was wrong, but she was lonely, and he was so attentive. Over a few months, their conversations became more personal as they started complaining to each other about me and Rebecca. Then one Wednesday, they were at a client function, and after a few too many drinks, Daniel walked her to her car and kissed her. She didn't know why, but she kissed him back until her guilt stopped her, and she pulled away. The rest of her story was sadly predictable. They kept having lunch, they kissed again, which led to making out in Jason's car after lunch. Then came the first encounter that Rebecca and I knew about when they came to our house for the first time. She swore that it was just sex and that she never loved him. She was just lonely, and he made her feel good about herself and feel wanted. She didn't enjoy the sex so much as the thrill of doing something she knew was so wrong. She still loved me and wanted to stay together and work on our marriage. Blah, blah, blah. When she was finished, I took a second to gather my thoughts before I responded to her. So I only have 2 questions. 1. Was this the first time that you cheated on me? And 2. Have you continued seeing Daniel after I left the house? What she didn't know was that I knew the answers before I asked the questions. I just wanted to see if she would be honest with me. Oh my God. Michael, please believe me that this was the first and only time that I've cheated. I actually believed her. I had paid a private investigator to dig into her and Jason's past. Rebecca and I provided access to all of our cell phone and banking information, and I gave him access to Angela's personal laptop. He found nothing suspicious on any of Angela's devices or our bank accounts until a couple of weeks before she and Daniel came to our house for the first time. At that point, there were tons of sexually charged text messages between them late at night. Okay, Sophia, I guess I believe you. I have no reason to believe that there's been any other affairs. Now, how about the second question? We talked a few times to compare notes on how to handle things with you and Rebecca, but we haven't actually seen each other since the day that video was recorded. Well, so much for honesty. I knew for a fact that she had seen him twice in our house since I left. So, Sophia, erase my problem. I know that is a blatant lie. Daniel was in this house the first 2 Friday nights after I left, and he stayed here the entire night both times. A look of panic was now spreading across her face. Do you remember Jonathan Brooks stopping by to remove the cameras after I confronted you? She nodded yes. Did it ever occur to you that I just might send him back to reinstall them when you were at work that next week? Do you think I'm stupid enough to believe that after screwing this aholy for who knows how many weeks, when I've left you and Samantha's thrown him out of his house, that the 2 of you wouldn't get together for some feeling sorry for yourself sex? I'm so sorry. Please let me explain. I was scared and alone. You and Rebecca had left us, and we just needed someone to talk to, she said with tears streaming down her face. Well, I know you did more than talk because, unlike you, the cameras don't lie. You know, Sophia, I could deal with the truth, but am not going to put up with lies. In the grand scheme of things, 2 more times are not that big of a deal, but lying is a deal breaker. Even at work, I am fairly tolerant when people make mistakes, but if anyone lies to me, they are gone. I had heard enough. Well, I kept my promise and let you talk, but you've proven that you're not ready to be completely honest. So my suggestion for you is to let our divorce become final at our court date and move on. I've got enough video of you 2 to start an adult site, and if you try to stall things, I might do just that. Goodbye, Sophia. Sophia decided to take my advice, and our divorce became final about 2 weeks later. The week after that, Lily graduated from college, and both Sophia and I did our best to focus on her that day. We were both really proud of her. We gave her a 2-week European cruise for graduation, and after that, she was going to come work for me full-time. The private investigator found a lot more dirt when it came to Daniel. Sophia may have thought she was special, but she was his 4th affair in the past 3 years. The investigator found that Daniel had been with 2 more women. That was all Rebecca needed to make her mind up and follow through with her divorce. I couldn't resist sending Sophia a copy of the investigator's report with a handwritten cover sheet from me. You may want to take a look at this report. Apparently, you weren't as special as you thought. And by the way, you will probably want to get tested for STDs. Affairs with 3 women would lead you to believe that this guy will stick his tool into just about anyone. Rebecca and I continued seeing each other regularly over the next few months. I really liked her, and I think the feeling was mutual. We did agree to take things slow for a while until all of the wounds from our divorces healed. She had a lot of really attractive qualities, and I enjoyed spending time with her. She was a lot of fun to be around, and on top of it all, she was a lot of fun in bed too. Good companionship and great sex, what more could a man ask for? I did have one more debt to pay. I had been trying to think of how I was going to pay Daniel back for all the hurt he caused, preferably one that kept me out of jail. I finally came up with an idea and ran it by Rebecca. At this point, I cared too much about her to do anything that would cause her pain. She laughed and said her only regret was that she wouldn't be there to see the look on his face. When the PI was investigating Daniel, he discovered that Daniel stopped at a particular bar every Friday night after work before heading home to his suite. So one Friday night, about 2 weeks after Daniel and Samantha's divorce was final, I had one of my project managers go with me to pay Daniel a visit at the bar. Bob was about my height, but he was probably 50 pounds heavier. We entered the bar and found Daniel exactly where the PI said he sat every week. He was in a booth by the windows, sitting by himself. I walked around so that I could approach him from the rear, and Bob approached from the opposite direction. When we got to his booth, we both pushed our way into the booth, with me beside Daniel and Bob facing him. Well, old friend. Do you remember me? I asked. It took a second for it to register in his brain that I was Angela's husband. Then his eyes went wide, and the color drained from his face. Look, I don't want any trouble. I'm really sorry for what I did. So can't we just let the past stay in the past? I flagged the waitress down and told her, my friend here wants to buy us a drink. Can you bring us 2 of your best bourbons? Oh, and make them doubles. After all, when you screw a man's wife, the least you can do is buy him a drink. At that, Daniel sank a little deeper into the bench. You know, Daniel, you don't just get to screw a guy's wife and not have to pay some kind of price. It was a good thing for you that I didn't find you when I first saw that video. My first thought was to rip that pitiful little tool of yours off and shove it down your throat until you choked on it. But lucky for you, I'm too old to go to jail. So let me explain to you how things are going to work for you. You will never speak to, interact with, and certainly never screw Sophia again. Is that clear? Yes, sir, he meekly replied. Don't worry about me. It'll go the opposite way if I ever even spot her walking down the street. Good. Now that we've got that clear, there's one other thing. You will never miss, be late with, or short pay your alimony and child support to Rebecca. Is that clear? Yes, sir, crystal clear. I turned my drink up and finished the last bit, and then reached into the bag I had set beside me when I walked in, pulled out a box gift-wrapped in black paper, and handed it to Daniel. Go ahead and open it, Aholy. Daniel cautiously opened the gift and found a box containing a 1.75-liter bottle of Jason E. Walker Black Label. Confused, he said, I'm not sure I understand. What's this for? Do you remember me just telling you that when you screw a man's wife, the least you can do is buy him a drink? He nodded that he understood. Well, Aholy, as much as I've screwed your ex-wife in the past 5 months, I figured I owed you a whole bottle. Enjoy. Thanks for watching this gripping tale of betrayal and revenge. Do you think Michael's actions were justified? Or did he go too far? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.